What you have in front of you in terms of this Dawa manual, this is something coming from the Qatar Guest Center where I work in Qatar, where we have set up this Dawa training course. Usually it runs for 9 days, 2 hours each day in the evening, taking professionals from different walks of life and giving them the necessary training, basic training to be able to do Dawa, amongst the non-Muslims that are many there. So what we're looking at is something very condensed. Means I won't be able to go over it with the kind of depth that we do it there. So it means I'm going to be skimming, be touching main points, and the material is there in your hands. It's for you to read and get more depth out of it. This is the main point. The other point to note that we do, when we do this course, we have assignments that we give the people who participate in the course. If you go to page 5, you'll see this is a page for course assignments. And obviously some of them are not going to be relevant to you because it's talking about weekly assignments, etc. And we're doing everything in 2 days, a few hours over 2 days. But one which is I think relevant to you all is that between today and tomorrow, I would like you each to prepare a Dawah plan, a plan for Dawah, wherever you are, whatever area of work you're involved in, or study, or whatever, for you to lay down a plan of how you would consistently be involved in Dawah, right? And this is as a part of an exercise for you to try to utilize what you have now. After we've finished the course, you can try to modify that and see how you can improve it. Also those issues that you're faced with, we can try to answer some of them in the question sessions. So by trying to develop a Dawah plan, the issues that you may not have thought of just sitting in the class, would come up. You would have an idea that I'm faced with this. How do I do this? How can I do Dawah in this circumstance or that circumstance, etc. So this is very important. And of course, this is following the basic, managerial principle. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? So you have some plan. You're going to give Dawah. You need to have worked out some plan for that Dawah. If you're just going to go out and do it as it comes, likely your Dawah is going to be weak. It will not have the kind of consistency it would if you actually planned it out. The other thing, again, it's quite difficult for you to do it between now and tomorrow, but if you can, before the end, tomorrow, between today and tomorrow, if you can, at least try to meet one non-Muslim, right, and try to give them Dawah, and make a record of your encounter. If you go on page 105, right, this is at the end of the book, second last page from the end of the book. There is a Dawah encounter and evaluation sheet where you try to give Dawah to a non-Muslim and you record your experience, right? And this you can make other photocopies of and try to record what you're doing. So you can check yourself, see your own improvement, check your progress. Actually, this is, if there is a system here or there, we have a committee which goes back and looks over these things. We meet after a month's time and people give up their evaluations and we see how things are going, how we can help them, etc. But maybe this society, the Ansar committee, they can try to develop this further, to keep tabs with people and their progress in the field of Dawah. Because of course any of these kind of things that we do, you want some follow-up. It's not, it's useless to just do something. It's, everybody's hyped up, wonderful today, and then after some time it will peter out. If there's no follow-up, there should be some kind of follow-up for those people who have attended the course, how they're doing now, how they're progressing, what problems they're facing, how can we resolve it, who can you cooperate with? Because oftentimes, Dawah, trying to do it as an individual, it has its own drawbacks. Whereas trying to do it, with other people who are in the same field or in similar fields, this will help to give you greater success in your Dawah. And of course, success ultimately is with Allah. The last point, which has to do with conversion stories. I mean, we will have some people give their conversion stories tomorrow, but between now and then, or shortly thereafter, you can go to different websites like sultan.org, islamworld.net, mentioned there, and look at the conversion stories, of what I would say 10 recent converts. I mean, there are stories which are about people who converted to Islam 50 years ago, and not those, but those who have recently converted within the last 10 years or 5 to 10 years, to go and read them and identify what was the turning point in each person's story. What was the point which caused that person to become a Muslim? Look at that point and just make a note of it in a short paragraph or whatever, what was that turning point? And how would I utilize that turning point in my dawah? Right? So you're not just reading stories for the entertainment, very nice story, but what practical use is it? How can I utilize that? How can I cater my dawah to utilize that particular point? So this is what I would ask you to do for yourselves and also for the course. The first topic is that of the dawah itself, as an introduction to dawah. Understanding, basically, that's the first section, deals with the obligation of dawah, to understand that it is not just something which is sunnah. That people categorize dawah, oftentimes they look at it as being something which is sunnah. If you do it, you get reward, but if you don't do it, no harm. But the point is that the term sunnah includes also things which are obligatory. It's from the sunnah, for example, from the Prophet ﷺ. He has told us from the sunnah that in terms of our obligatory acts, say Salatul Eid, attending Salatul Eid. You'll not find it in the Quran anywhere, right? But Salatul Eid, the obligation of its attendance, comes from the Sunnah. But so we can say it is from the Sunnah, but it is from the Sunnah which identifies what is obligatory. So from the Sunnah there is what identifies what is obligatory, what is recommended, what is permissible, what is disliked, and even what is haram. The Sunnah will identify for you things which are haram, which you may not find in the Quran. Eating of birds of prey, for example. It's not in the Quran. It is from the Sunnah that it is identified. So this term Sunnah, there are two meanings of it, and people mix up these meanings. When you're using it, one context, it means something that the Prophet ﷺ said, did, or approved. And something which is good to do. If you do it, you're rewarded. If you don't do it, there's no punishment. See, these are technical terms used in two different fields. One is in the science of hadith, it has a particular meaning. One is in the science of fiqh, right? Islamic law, it has another meaning. So it is important to understand that this term sunnah is not an excuse for not to do dawah, right? That in fact the dawah was the methodology of the prophets. That was their lives. That was their life's mission, was dawah, conveying the word of Allah to humankind. And Allah praises those who do it throughout the Quran. There are many verses mentioned here, regarding it. وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِمَّنْ دَعَى إِلَى اللَّهِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا وَقَالَ إِنَّنِي مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. Who is better in speech than one who calls to Allah and does righteous deeds and says, indeed, I'm among the Muslims. Allah praises the one who calls to Allah. Highly praised. And the Prophet ﷺ, of course, had mentioned that whoever calls to guidance will receive the same reward as the one who follows him, without any decrease in the reward of his followers. It's a basic principle. Anybody who accepts Islam, or anybody who finds their way to Islam as a result of your effort, then you will get reward from whatever that person does. And of course, each and every one of us on the day of judgment will be in need of whatever good deeds we can find. And alhamdulillah, this is a massive source of good deeds. We'll see coming for us, we'll wonder where it came from. Because you do that good and you don't know the consequence where it goes. Ultimately you do the best that you can, and inshallah that can be multiplied many, many times over for you. Anyway, the point is that da'wah, as I said, is an obligation. It is an obligation basically according to one's ability. Though scholars have divided it into different categories, what they call the individual obligation or fard ayn and the community obligation or fard kifaya. Scholars have divided it into these two categories. However, the reality is that it is today fard ayn, an individual obligation. And scholars like Sheikh bin Baz, he said very clearly, in looking at this, that at a time when there is a shortage of callers, when evil is prevalent and ignorance dominates, sounds like our times, right? Da'wah becomes fard ayn on everyone according to their ability. It becomes fard ayn for everyone according to their ability. So we cannot find any excuse not to give da'wah. And there are so many different ways. Actually, in the book, there's one section on tips for da'wah. Actually, it's called, it's on page 50 through page 57, called More Than 80 Ways to Make Da'wah. More than 80 ways to make da'wah. For all the different circumstances, at school, at home, the workplace, wherever. There are many, many tips here. Really, there's so many different ways. But what happens is that people don't stop and think about it, don't stop and analyze it. You just say, well, I'm in a class, non-Muslim students are with me for a minute and they're gone. How can I give da'wah? They don't stop and think out, in a day, where do I meet non-Muslims? How many times do I meet them? What are the different ways to give da'wah? Is it only just talking to people? No. It could be giving them a pamphlet, giving them a brochure, inviting them to a lecture. It could be a variety of different other ways. Anyway, the point is that, as we said, today it is an obligation on each and every one of us. And the Prophet ﷺ, so as for a person not to say, well, according to ability, I don't have any ability. My knowledge of Islam is very weak, etc. Prophet ﷺ said, بَلِّغُوا عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً. Convey whatever you've learned from me, even if it's only one verse from the Quran. And each and every one of us knows قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ is the essence of the message. It is the solution to the problems of all of these other religions and communities, etc. Because they don't know قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Now, you might think that قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ means, say, He, Allah, is one. But that's not what it means. Ahad doesn't mean one. It means uniquely one. And there's a difference. Because Allah could have said, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ وَاحِدٌ. And Wahid is one of the names of Allah, Al-Wahid. But that's not the term He used here. He used Ahad. And there is a fine distinction between Ahad and Wahid. What is that distinction? I can say, I have one book here. Wahid. Kitab Wahid. But you can also have one book. She can also have one book. Many different people can have one book. But when I say, I have one book using the term Ahad, it means one book like which there is no other. Uniquely one. And this is the essence of the message, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, that Allah is uniquely one. To convey that, the rest of the surah, Allahu Samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad, all of that is explanation of Ahad. So the essence of that surah, which the companions and others used to call it Surah At-Tawheed. We know it as Surah Al-Ikhlas, but they used to call it commonly Surah At-Tawheed. They call it Surah Al-Ikhlas also, but Surah At-Tawheed, because it has the essence of the message of Tawheed. So powerful that the Prophet ﷺ said that it's equivalent to a third of the Quran. If we were to divide the Quran into three parts, its meanings into three parts, Qul huwallahu ahad identifies one whole section of the Quran. Right? So everybody has that. So nobody can say, I can't give dawah to that. Qul huwallahu ahad. No excuse. Furthermore, in order to stress that this is not just a recommendation, you find in both the Quran and the Sunnah a curse placed by Allah on those who don't give da'wah. Those who have the means, who have the knowledge, and they don't convey the message, they are cursed by Allah. And we can find that in Surah Al-Baqarah verse 159, إن الذين يكتمون ما أنزلنا من البينات والهدى من بعد ما بيناه للناس في الكتاب أولئك يلعنهم الله ويلعنهم اللاعنون. Indeed, those who hide the clear messages and guidance that I have revealed after I have made it clear to the people in the scripture, those are cursed by Allah and cursed by all who would curse. And the Prophet ﷺ had said, من كتم علما مما ينفع الله به في أمر الناس أمر الدين ألجمه الله يوم القيامة بلجام من النار. Whoever hides knowledge by which Allah benefits people in their affairs, in the affairs of their religion, Allah will bridle him on the day of resurrection with a bridle from the hellfire. This is serious. And it's one of the basic principles in usul al-fiqh, that if the consequence of an action is that one receives punishment from the hellfire as a bridle is what you put on a horse to control him, right? If the consequence is the hellfire, an element of the hellfire, then it means that that act is haram. So it is haram not to give dawah when one is able. Now, of course, one may say, I'm not really hiding knowledge, because when we think of hiding knowledge, we think in terms of somebody coming to you and say, can you tell me about Islam? And you say to them, no. I don't think you deserve to know about Islam because, you Britishers are involved in Iraq and killing our Muslim brothers, so I'm not going to tell you about Islam. Okay, that's obviously hiding the knowledge. That's kitmanul ilm in the obvious sense. And of course, that's not permissible. Not permissible. But there is indirect hiding. Indirect hiding means that you had the means. This is a person who studies with you in the university. You've known them for the last 4 years. You studied throughout the university, you knew them. They're in all your classes. You talk to them about homework. You talk to them about everything under the sun except for Islam. You have hidden the knowledge. You had all the means, but you hid that knowledge. And of course, on the day of judgment, that person will curse you. That person, when Allah calls up that person for judgment, that person will curse you. Will ask Allah, double that person's punishment. So, the obligation of conveying the message of Islam is not something to be taken lightly. And of course, some people, as a shortcut, will say, well, actually, giving da'wah is being taken care of. We have Jamaat Tabligh. Jamaat Tabligh, that's Jamaatul Da'wah. They're doing the da'wah. So therefore, the obligation on the individual has been taken care of because Jamaat Tabligh is doing it. But it's enough for us to recognize that the methodology of Jamaat Tabligh is to call Muslims only. They tell their followers, this is their philosophy, their approach, don't go and call the non-Muslims. Call the Muslims. Why? Because if you invite a non-Muslim into Islam today and Muslims are in such bad shape, it will drive them out. So you need to clean up your house before you invite anybody in. This is the philosophy. Of course, it sounds quite logical, quite reasonable. However, that was not the methodology of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. That was not his methodology. He called everybody. Whether you're a Muslim, after you became became a Muslim, or whether you are a non-Muslim, he gave the da'wah. So da'wah is not restricted and should not be restricted to any one group. Even if, for example, we say, okay, we're focusing on non-Muslims, which was the methodology of the Prophet ﷺ, and a Muslim comes along, right? And you say, well, no, my focus is on non-Muslims, so I'm not going to deal with you. Well, of course, remember in the Quran, Allah said what? Abasa wa tawalla. What is that surah all about? Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, wanting to deal with a group of leaders of the non-Muslims, a Muslim came to him, needed some da'wah, and he turned away. What did Allah do? Allah chided him. You shouldn't have done that. Give the man the message. In fact, he has the first right to it. So for our da'wah, it is not limited to any one group. Some people try to make a distinction between da'wah and what they call islah. We use da'wah when we're calling non-Muslims and islah when we're calling Muslims. But really, this is a technical definition which they have made, which is not really from the statements of the Prophet ﷺ, or the Sahaba, etc. They use da'wah to cover everything. If you want to make that distinction in terms of your own program, there's no harm. It's not to say you're doing a bid'ah, something evil, etc. But know that ultimately, according to Arabic language, da'wah includes both. Because it's ad-da'wah ilallah. That is what the full translation of or term is, ad-da'wah ilallah. And actually we've now entered into the characteristics of the call. Ad-da'wah ilallah. That is the full term. Calling to Allah. That's what the da'wah is to. Da'wah is not to my group, the Ansar, or Hizb ut-Tahrir, or whatever. Where people who get caught up into groupism, their da'wah ends up being to groups. So the first thing you tell a person when they're coming into Islam, you're calling them to Islam, or they just came into Islam, which group are you going to join? Our group, right? This is the group. We're the ones who called you. You should join our group, right? So no, they're not calling to Allah anymore. You're calling to your group, or you're calling to a madhab, or you're calling to This is not the da'wah. The da'wah is calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to Islam as it was revealed. Islam as it was revealed. So what does that mean? If we're calling to a madhab, and some people unfortunately will call to a madhab. You come into Islam, they'll say to you, listen, you have to follow a madhab. Best madhab to follow is the Hanafi madhab. Why? Because most Muslims are Hanafis. Most Muslims are Hanafis. That's the biggest group. So better you become a Hanafi. No, we have to say to them, what was the madhab of Abu Huraira? He was a Hanafi. What about the madhab of Abu Hanifa? Was he a Hanafi? If you asked Abu Hanifa, what was your madhab? You think he would say, I'm a Hanafi? No, he wouldn't. Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i, they're going to say, I was a Shafi'i, I was a Maliki. No. None of them would say that. What would be their answer? What is the answer of the Sahaba? What is the answer of the Tabi'een, the great Imams? What were their answer when you asked them, what was your madhab? Tell me. What was the madhab of the Sahaba? It was the madhab of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is Quran, Sunnah, etc. No, but we say it is the madhab of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That was the madhab they were following. They were trying to follow the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's what we call to. That's what they call to. That's what we should be calling to. The way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is embodied in the Quran and the Sunnah. But it is not just the Quran and the Sunnah, but the Quran and the Sunnah as it was understood by the Sahaba and the Tabi'een and the great Imams, etc. Not the Quran and the Sunnah as you understand it, because if we were to hear the Quran and the Sunnah as Hizb ut-Tahrir understands it, then we have something else. You have a movement which is denying the Adhab al-Qabr. They say we follow Quran and Sunnah. Or even the Qadianis. They say we follow Quran and Sunnah, but they say Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam wasn't the last of the prophets. Right? So just saying I follow Quran and Sunnah is not enough in terms of understanding. Yes, I can say I follow the Quran and Sunnah. That's perfectly legitimate. But what do you mean by that? The Quran and Sunnah as understood by whom? By you? Because you have people today doing that too. You know? You have some sisters who follow the Quran and who say they follow the Quran and Sunnah, and who were saying, well, you know, we need a female tafsir of the Quran. You know, because all the mufassirun, all those who made tafsir of the Quran, they're all men. So they made tafsir from a men's perspective. We need today, in our times, we need a female mufassir. I mean, as if a female mufassir who is following the way of the early generations is going to come up with a different tafsir, you know. But this is the modern understanding, the individual understanding. So we say that the da'wah itself is a da'wah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not to a madhab, etc. As Sheikh bin Baz had mentioned, the way of Allah, the mighty and majestic, is submission, the straight path, the religion of Allah which He sent His messenger with. Therefore, this is what must be called to, not the madhab of such and such a person, nor the opinion of any individual. The way of Allah is that which the noble Quran and the pure authentic Sunnah of the Messenger ﷺ directs one to. It is necessary for the Muslim missionary, Muslim caller to Allah, to call people to the whole of Islam and not to cause division among them, nor to be a blind follower of any madhab, a tribe, a sheikh, or a leader. Rather, his aim should be to affirm and clarify the truth and establish people upon that truth, even if it contradicts the opinion of such and such a person or so and so. So this is the essence of the da'wah. It is to the way of the Prophet ﷺ as it was understood by the early generations. And of course, there are a number of different references that the Prophet ﷺ made to that way. Because you find people say, well, you know, in Islam, there are many ways. Why should we restrict things to one way? There are many ways. But actually, if you listen to that argument, that is like the argument of those who say there are many ways to Allah. You have people out there who say there are many ways to Allah. Even some people who call themselves Muslims. They are known as the perennialists. Perennialists who have headquarters here in the UK. You know, the Islamic Text Society, if you've seen, or if you know that group, I mean, they promote this idea that all religions, really, as long as you're sincere, you're on a path to Allah. That religions in relationship to Allah is like a wheel. It has spokes and a hub in the middle. All the spokes lead to the hub. So if you're a sincere Buddhist, true sincere Buddhist, or you're a sincere Christian, or you're a sincere Hindu, whatever, or Muslim, you're all headed to Allah. Of course, we reject this. وَمَنْ يَبْتَغِي غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا فَلَنْ يُقْبَلَ مِنْهُ. Allah says very clear, whoever accepts a religion other than Islam, whoever takes other than Islam as his or her religion, it will not be accepted from them. Finish. There is only one way. There's only one religion. So as there is only one God, and there's only one human race, that's why we don't need many religions. For all those people out there in the da'wah field, you run into people who say, well, you know, what's wrong? You know, we're all believing in God, we're all doing good things, so and so and so. You know, why do you want to restrict? Why is it only your religion? No. Because God only provided one religion for people. He didn't want confusion. He's not the author of confusion. So human need is one. From the time of Adam to the last person of this world, human nature will not change. The need for human beings will remain the same. So we only need one religion. So God only revealed one religion. So as there's one God, one human race, there's only one religion, and there's only one way to follow that religion. There's not many ways, because again you're ending up in confusion. There's only one way to follow it. But that way, we have unfortunately today some people who want to make that way so narrow, it's like a thread. If you just put your foot slightly to the side, you're off. You know? And then you're maligned and attacked and you're deviant and this, that and the other. They have made that way so narrow that if they were to apply that way to the Sahaba, they would be cutting Sahabas off the manhaj. Sahaba, Tabi'een, Imams, left and right, all the way down. Because they have gone to the other extreme. Yes, it is one way, but it is a broad way. It does allow for differences amongst in issues that may be issues of Aqidah. Say, people say, no, it's differences in fiqh, but we'll not allow differences in Aqidah. Why not? Sahaba differed over some issues of Aqidah. They did differ. And so did the Tabi'een. And so did the Imams, etc. They differed over issues of fiqh. They differed over issues of Aqidah. Differences will exist, but they're not fundamental differences. Nobody was differing whether Allah is one or not. No. Nobody's differing whether Salah is wajib 5 times a day or not. No. There are basic issues of the deen. There are no differences. But there are secondary issues related to both Aqidah and fiqh about which people differed from the time of the Sahaba. That's reality. So if we can accept from the time of the Sahaba some differences, then we should be able to accept them today also. That's the bottom line. That we have a level of tolerance which will allow for differences. You know, it is one way, it is one path, and we know it's not one just based on our own desires. It is one based on knowledge. So we find, for example, the Prophet ﷺ saying, هذه سبيلي أدعو إلى الله على بصيرة. This is my path, and I call to Allah with clear knowledge. Clear knowledge. على بصيرة. Calling to Allah with what is clear. So we don't call to Allah based on doubts, on things which we are unclear about ourselves, supposition, maybes, possibly. No, we call to Allah based on what is clear. So that is essential principle in the calling to Allah. And of course, when we call to Allah, call people to Allah, meaning calling them to the religion of Allah, the religion of Allah has a variety of elements, and we have to put these elements in some kind of an order of priority. What do we call them to first? And we know Prophet ﷺ, when he sent Mu'adh ibn Jabal to Yemen, he said, إِنَّكَ تَقْدَمُ عَلَى قَوْمٍ أَهْلِ كِتَابٍ فَلْيَكُنْ أَوَّلَ مَا تَدْعُوهُمْ إِلَيْهِ أَنْ يُوَحِّدُوا اللَّهَ Ta'ala. You'll be going to Christians and Jews. So the first thing that you should invite them to is the assertion of the oneness of Allah. So that is the core message. That should be what we focus on. However, that doesn't mean that in every conversation you have with anybody calling them to Islam, it has to be on the oneness of Allah. Somebody comes and asks you about hijab. Why do Muslim women cover themselves up? You know, why are you forcing, to men they will say, why are you forcing your women to cover themselves up? Or to women, why do you women allow men to force you to cover yourselves up? You cannot ignore their question and say, listen, Allah is one. Right? This is what you need to know. Don't worry about why we do this or why. No, you need to know Allah is one. Well, that's true. They do need to know Allah is one. But in the course of giving dawah, you know, you must deal with the questions that they raise. You fulfill what they are trying to get clarity on, and then you try to bring that back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because of course when you describe hijab, you know, you will describe, you know, the purposes of hijab, which Allah has then identified in the Quran. So you take it back to Allah ultimately. But you must deal with what is in front of you. But you have an idea, you have a focus. What is the most important point that I need to get to this person? What is going to save them on the Day of Judgment? Whether they accept hijab or they don't accept hijab, you might find a nun, right? A Catholic nun who accepts hijab. Wonderful, beautiful. But she's on a path to hell. So it's not accepting hijab or not accepting hijab, but not going to necessarily make a difference whether a person makes it to paradise or not. But What will make the difference is whether they believe in the oneness, the unique oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we also find, a good example of that in the case of Prophet Yusuf, in the prison when the people were with him and they asked him to explain their dreams for them. He took that opportunity while explaining their dreams for them to call them to the oneness of Allah. Same thing with Prophet Isa as a child, when his mother brought him to the people and they were shocked. They're questioning her, how could you do this? You're a righteous woman. Your mother was a righteous woman. How could you do this? And she pointed to Prophet Isa. He dealt with it. He clarified that his mother was a righteous woman, but he used that opportunity to call them to the oneness of Allah. So that is the unique oneness of Allah, is the main goal. Actually, the first two chapters, you have questions on page 10 and page 15. Those are for you to go over just to make sure you have caught what you're supposed to catch from that.
الحمد لله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض وجعل الظلمات والنور ثم الذين كفروا بربهم يعدلون والسماء بنيناها بأيد وإنا لموسعون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وأوحى ربك إلى النحل أن اتخذي من الجبال بيوتا ومن الشجر ومما يعرشون ثم كلي من كل الثمرات فاسلكي سبل ربك ذللا يخرج من بطونها شراب مختلف ألوانه فيه شفاء للناس إن في ذلك لآية لقوم يتفكرون ألم يروا إلى الطير مسخرات في جو السماء ما يمسكهن إلا الله إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يؤمنون أو كظلمات في بحر لجي يغشاه موج من فوقه سحاب ظلمات بعضها فوق بعض إذا أخرج يده لم يكد يراها ومن لم يجعل الله له نورا فما له من نور أمن خلق السماوات والأرض وأنزل لكم من السماء ماء فأنبتنا به حدائق ذات بهجة ما كان لكم أن تنبتوا شجرها أإله مع الله بل هم قوم يعدلون ثم خلقنا النطفة علقة فخلقنا العلقة مضغة فخلقنا المضغة عظاما فكسونا العظام لحما ثم أنشأناه خلقا آخر فتبارك الله أحسن الخالقين هو الذي يريكم البرق خوفا وطمعا وينشئ السحاب الثقال ويسبح الرعد بحمده والملائكة من خيفته ويرسل الصواعق فيصيب بها من يشاء وهم يجادلون في الله وهو شديد المحال الله الذي يرسل الرياح فتثير سحابا فيبسطه في السماء كيف يشاء ويجعله كسفا فترى الودق يخرج من خلاله فإذا أصاب به من يشاء من عباده إذا هم يستبشرون ألم تروا كيف خلق الله 7 سماوات طباقا وجعل القمر فيهن نورا وجعل الشمس سراجا والذاريات ذروا فالحاملات وقرا فالجاريات يسرا فالمقسمات أمرا إنما توعدون لصادق وإن الدين لواقع قل انظروا ماذا في السماوات والأرض وما تغني الآيات والنذر عن قوم لا يؤمنون.
We're calling people to Islam, and we have to be aware of certain issues concerning them. You know, we have a context. As we said, we don't call by just saying Allah is one, everybody you go to, Allah is one, Allah is one, Allah is one. No matter what circumstance you find yourself in, you're saying to people, Allah is one. It's true, but that message has to be brought in a way which is suitable for that particular circumstance that you're calling to. And we have to, even before looking at how do we cloak that message, how do we present that message in such a way that it will effectively reach people, we have to keep our basic objectives in sight. The issue is, are we trying to convert people, or are we communicating with them and conveying a message? We have to have that clear. Because if in our minds, Dawa means your main program is converting people, then of course when you get out there and you try to convert people, most people will not convert. So you will feel failure. You will feel, a failure. You will feel within yourself, weakness and, I'm useless, I can't do this, and you will quit. Because you had the wrong idea in mind. Whereas if you know that the responsibility is what? Tabligh. Not tabligh al-jamaat. Jamaat tabligh, no, but tabligh meaning conveying the message. Tabligh al-risala. That this is what the essence of it is, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَهُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِالْمُهْتَدِينَ. Indeed, you cannot guide whom you love, but Allah guides whom He wills. He's telling Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that. And who are we? Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not able to guide Abu Talib, so close to him, who protected him, who raised him, who gave his own child to him to raise. He couldn't guide him. So then what? As Allah told the Prophet ﷺ, وَمَا عَلَى الرَّسُولِ إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ الْمُبِينُ. The only obligation on the messenger is to give the clear message. That is the obligation. Giving the clear message. So, if we understand that, then that takes a weight off our backs, takes a big burden from us. We're not now having to convert people. We're just about trying to get that message across, and to get it across effectively and well. Right? So, there are some principles that we should keep in mind when we are trying to get across that message effectively. First of the principles is listen before you speak. Listen before you speak. Meaning what? Meaning, yes, you have a message you want to tell people, but if your approach is just, as soon as you meet a person, you just ramble on. You just give them you're a preacher. You're out there giving them the whole story. You don't have any idea what their ideas are, what their issues are, so on. So you're just coming and telling them, you know. So what happens? You're out there, you're telling a Jehovah's Witness that God didn't have a son, Jesus is not the Son of God, and all this stuff. After you talk to him for 1 hour, he tells you, guess what? I didn't believe that Jesus had a son. Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe that Jesus had a son. That God had a son. That Jesus was created. He was created. Yes, they're using the term son, but he was not the begotten son, so they don't have that belief. So you just wasted 1 hour, you know, when they didn't. And you might even find many Christians, for example. Remember, they did surveys among the bishops of England here, and found that more than 50% of the bishops didn't believe that Jesus was the Son of God. That Jesus was God. Didn't believe that. So if the bishops have that belief, then you can imagine what is amongst the common people. So though, yes, there is an official belief line, a creed, people are still believing whatever they feel like believing. So you, as a da'i, one who is not saying, you know, that's my 24-hour duty. No, I have different fields that I work in, etc. But I know that wherever I am, I have a duty to convey the word of Allah, as long as there's an opportunity for me to do so. So what is my approach? My approach here should be that, like that of a doctor. How the doctor deals with his patient. When you go in to see the doctor, does he start writing the prescription already? Before you even reach the seat? He's writing out a prescription. When you got to the seat, he just gives you the prescription, you say shukran and you leave? No. He has to hear what your problems are. He has to listen to you. Hear what is your problem. After he has understood your illness, then he prescribes the suitable remedy. And that's the same thing in Dawa. We're going to convey to them the message, but how do we convey it? It's like medicine. We have to convey it in the way which is suitable for that particular person that we are giving the da'wah to. So we need to hear what they have to say. Hear their ideas. What are their thoughts? Right? Second point to keep in mind is that you should put yourself in other people's shoes. Meaning, when you're giving da'wah, the language that you're using, stop and think. If I were a non-Muslim who knew nothing about Islam, would this have any value to me? You're giving da'wah to somebody, a non-Muslim, knows nothing about Islam, and you're quoting from the Quran. You're quoting what Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said. You're quoting what Sheikh so-and-so said. Well, this person doesn't even believe in Islam at all, has no belief in Islam. You're going to tell them, what does the Quran mean to them? Nothing. So you're quoting the Quran to them is useless. You're not putting yourself in their shoes. Now the message of the Quran, you can tell them, of course. In the course of your da'wah, the message of the Quran should be that, because when we said, you know, calling to Allah ala basira, this means according to Quran and Sunnah and the understanding of the earlier generations. We take their understanding, but we put it in a language which is applicable to that person. So just putting ourselves in their shoes. We should think, just stop and think for ourselves for a moment. And that's one of the important things which come up with in this line, is using the term Allah. Using the term Allah. This is something in Dawah people have debated about. Should we use the term God, or should we use the term Allah? Now, what you find is surveys which have been done among non-Muslims have shown clearly that the vast majority of them believe or think that Allah is a different God from the God they believe in. It's the God of the Muslims. You know, like the Hindus have Shiva, Ganesh, the Muslims have Allah. Some of them even, you know, made articles about it. Mori did a thing about the moon god. Allah is the moon god of the Muslims. You know, all kinds of foolishness out there. So once you use the term Allah to somebody who has not been familiarized, has not been given an understanding, then that is going to conjure up in their minds all kinds of other images, etc., which is just going to affect your da'wah. So really, it is most effective really in giving da'wah to non-Muslims. It's better to use the term God. And you clarify who God really is. Because ultimately the God they believe in is the same God we believe in. But they have got some misconceptions about God. That he had a son. That he became a man. And a variety of other things connected to it. But we clarify those misconceptions. But it's the same God ultimately. And we need to start from that common ground with them. So again, this is the issue of putting yourself in another person's shoes. Understanding how they are looking at Islam, the world of Islam, etc. in the course of giving our da'wah. We are looking at the context in which we are giving our da'wah. What are the issues that we need to keep in mind? We said there were 3 basic issues that we should start off with. Understanding whether we're trying to convert people or convey a message. We said it was really conveying the message. We said also listening before we speak. That's important. If you want to convey a message, you need to listen and know what message you should be giving, how you should be giving that message. And also, we said we should put ourselves in the shoes of others. Hear ourselves. Hear our terminologies, how we're expressing that message. Is it in a way which would encourage understanding from the non-Muslims? Or is it a way which is going to create more questions and doubts in their minds? Now, as a general principle, when we come into a new situation, we have to assess that situation. Assess it. Judge what is the circumstance that we have found ourselves in. Among the things that we need to keep in mind when we're assessing a situation is our timing. That the message has to be given at the appropriate times. Meaning that we don't try to do everything at one time. Somebody expresses some interest. I'd like to know something about Islam. You bring for them a carton of books. No, this is bad timing. Give them a pamphlet. Let them read that. After they've absorbed that information, they show further interest, you give them something else. You work with them. Don't overload. This is information overload, bad timing. Also, what we need to keep in mind is the audience itself, the nature of the audience. And what is most important in that is what we call the group mentality. If you're talking to people as a group, they function differently from people as individuals. Meaning, if you sat and you talked with a person by themselves, they might agree with you, they might listen, and etc., etc. But then you find that same person in a group, you try to talk to them and you find that they're not. They're siding with the group. Because that is the nature of people. When you're with a group, this is what they call peer pressure. You don't want to say anything that is going to make your group look at you, negatively. So you'll go along with it, even though in your heart you agree with what the person is saying. But in that group situation, you're caught. So the da'wah in general, if you have a choice between talking to a person in a group, a student in your class, for example, there are other students around, they want to ask something about Islam, something like this, better to talk to them separately. To talk to them while their friends are around with them, then you will not get as good a response as if you talk to them by themselves. Because people are much more, because they don't feel any pressure on them there. It's much more easy for them to accept, to discuss things out without it being under the pressure of an audience. So it is important for us to know and to avoid those kind of circumstances where we can. However, there are circumstances where you can't avoid it. You've been invited to speak to a group. What do? You'll say, sorry, I can only speak to individuals? No, you speak to the group. You try to get some, message across to them, as a group. And of course, it's best to use principles which will bring out their ideas. The idea of listening, because of course, listen before you speak doesn't work well when you're giving a presentation to an audience. But how you can make it work for you is involve the audience in your presentation. Get them to bring out their ideas. So rather than just tell, you ask them some questions. What's your idea on that? What do you think? What have you heard? Let them give you some of their ideas so they feel a direct involvement, so you can hear some of what they're saying. Also, the location where you're giving the dawah. You have to choose a suitable location for that audience that you're trying to reach. There's some places that are just not suitable. You don't go into a pub to try to give dawah. Yes, there are non-Muslims in there, and maybe some of them might listen to you, but that's just not an appropriate place. It's not appropriate for the people you're trying to call to, because that is an environment of drunkenness. People might say anything. And besides that, Muslims seeing you walking into a pub, you're just creating problems for yourself in terms of your own, functioning in the Muslim community. So you have to choose locations which are appropriate, where people will hear. For example, say you're giving dawah at the supermarket. Somebody's working on the checkout counter. You want to give them some literature. You see that person's friendly type of person, whatever, and so you want to give them some literature. Well, do you choose the time when the place is busy? Rush hour, when people are coming in and buying, and so this is the time you want to give the person? No. There are times in the day when nobody's coming in. Hardly anybody comes in to buy anything. That's the time to go and give the material that you want to give. So, even in terms of location, there are elements of timing that link up with location. Actually, all of these are interlinked. Then, the background of the person you're calling themselves. Do you call a person who is highly educated in the same way you call a person who is not highly educated? Is it right to make a distinction in terms of how you approach people? Yes, it's quite reasonable. It's quite reasonable. Ali ibn Abi Talib had said you should speak to people according to the level of their intelligence. You make a judgment, a value judgment, and you speak to them according to what is suitable for them. It's like you're giving dawah to a young person, 15 years old. You're going to give dawah the same way you give to a person who is in their 30s? No. Examples you're going to use, the depth you're going to go in is going to be different. And similarly, even, you're giving the message, for example, you want to give the message that, Prophet Isa isn't or wasn't God to a non-Muslim. Now, if you're talking to a person, simple background, who's not studied philosophy and all this kind of thing, you can reach them very simply by saying to them, could you ever be God? Is it possible that you could become God? If they say yes, then of course, stop your line of questioning, find somebody else. Because somebody else has lost it, they're out there somewhere, right? So the average person who's still got their sense about them, they're going to say, no, I couldn't be God. So you ask them, why? Why not? Why couldn't you become God? So because I'm a human being. Human beings are not God. Can't become God. So then you ask them, was Jesus Christ a human being? The simple person, the average person, they would say, yeah, he was a human being. So then, he couldn't have been God. Basic, simple logic. Simple person would say, oh, I never really thought about it that way. Yeah, you're right. He couldn't have been God. I just grew up saying he was God all along anyway. I really hadn't thought about it, right? Really, but what you said is true. But now if you talk to somebody who's in university, they studied philosophy 101 or whatever, then you tell that person, could you become God? He said no. Was Jesus a human being? He stops, he's thinking ahead now. He's not just going to answer your question. In his heart, he knows, yes, he was a human being. He should say yes. But if he says yes, then he's lost the argument. So his approach will be, not quite. Right? You know? He appeared like a human being, but really he was God. Or he was God inside of a human being body. Or, you know, all kinds of, you know, Christian philosophers in the past, they had all kinds of explanations for it. But that's what will happen. So the result you got from a person who has not been, whose nature has not been distorted by philosophy, is different from a person who has had that kind of exposure. So naturally, when you're approaching people, you have to then approach them in a different manner. The other thing to keep in mind too is that in the course of giving da'wah, it is good in the beginnings to focus on people's misconceptions about Islam. In fact, usually myself, when I'm invited to give a talk at universities or whatever, non-Muslim environments, my basic beginning talk is misconceptions about Islam and Muslims, where I explain about misconceptions concerning religious issues, about Allah, showing them that yes, we believe in the angels and the resurrection and the things that you believe in. I mean, but of course there are some differences. You know, we do highlight the differences also, but we give them a basic understanding, clarifying the misconceptions that they have, whether it's about social issues or about, you know, different religious issues, dress codes and things like this. Clarify it through misconceptions, dealing with people's misconceptions. And of course this means that we have to listen to what people have to say, or we are listening to what people have to say in the media and we're clarifying it to an audience. And that is a general good procedure. However, if you find yourself in a situation where a person is raising misconceptions, not because they want to find out honestly what's wrong, but they just want to disable your da'wah. They want to pull the rug out from under you, you know, trip you up. You're giving a talk and they're question, what about so and so and so? What about so and so? They're coming all, you can't even get across the thing that you're trying to, because they're bringing all these questions. You see, this person is not really seeking understanding. They just want to make a fool of you, you know, to disable your da'wah. So what do you do then? At this point, then you can't look at their initial misconception. You need to jump ahead, like Prophet Ibrahim did when he explained to the king that his Lord is the one who causes life and death. Then the king said to him, Ana uhyi wa umit, I give life and death. Now he could have stopped here to explain to him that, listen, when you give life, it's not the same as when Allah gives life. Your giving life is just allowing somebody to live, right? You didn't kill him, so you allowed him to live. That's your giving life. Where Allah is one who's giving life to the dead. Something which was not living becomes living, that's Allah giving life. He didn't do that. He jumped 2 steps ahead and he said that Allah brings the sun from the east. Bring it from the west. Okay? You know, if that's your line of reasoning, then go there. So similarly, for example, you're giving da'wah, somebody raises up an issue about polygamy, you're talking to them about polygamy, you know, and they're starting to bring this, that, and everywhere. So, you know, you guys, all the excesses that exist in this, that, and the other. You just ask them, hey, do you think you have monogamy? Monogamy. You know, you're questioning all about this polygamy thing here. Do you think you have monogamy? As if we're the only ones who are in polygamy. Muslims have polygamy. You think you non-Muslims don't have polygamy too? You think there is monogamy in Britain? Huh? Is that what's going on here? Monogamy? No, it's not. The average, you know, married Brit has girlfriends, extramarital affairs, mistresses, all this. That's the norm. So you don't have monogamy here. That's just something you have on the books. Reality is polygamy is going on here. In fact, you've got more polygamy going on here than we have in our Muslim world. So you just stop that. Put it in its place. You want to look at this honestly, then we look at it from this perspective here. Let's be honest. In terms of the audience, again, leaving misconceptions to the topics that we choose to give our da'wah with, there are things that we have to focus on, and we said that Tawheed before was what Prophet ﷺ stressed when going to Christians and Jews, people who have a concept of one God, that we should focus on that. So we should choose our topics based on that understanding. You're talking to a Hindu, then you have to choose a topic appropriate to his or her understanding as a Hindu. We also have to look at the method by which we deliver that message. What is the method that we use? Do we use an emotional method? People are coming at you with emotionalism. Do you respond in emotionalism? Or should you be calm? Don't get caught up in the heat of the emotion. Well, there are times when emotionalism is important and is good, and there are times when it's not. And Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, in giving his khutbahs, you hear the companions describing him sometimes speaking and his eyes would become red, his voice became loud, stressing certain points. So there are times for that, and there are other times for calmness, etc. So we have to choose the appropriate form of giving the da'wah, which will effectively carry our message across to the people. And one of the things that we have to also keep in mind, very important, is that of gradual progression in our da'wah. That's page 29 to 31. Gradual progression in our da'wah. What are we dealing with here? That people in general are on different scales. You have people on the very bottom scale, which is a person who is negligent. They don't care to hear what you have to say. Not interested. You have people who are hostile. They're coming at you in a hostile manner with, You have people who are neutral. Okay, go ahead. You have people who have shown some interest. Okay, let's hear what you have to say. I wouldn't mind finding out. You have people who are positive. Could you explain so and so and so and so and so and so? Really, I've been thinking about this so and so, And people who are on your side. Yes, I agree. This is weapons of mass destruction was just a game which people use to get at the oil or whatever. So people are on different scales. The main idea is to try to bring them, those that are below neutral, to neutral. Right? To bring them, those who are either aggressive or uninterested, negligent. You have to do what is necessary to get them to a neutral position. A person who's not interested at all, you have to say something to catch their interest. Right? Of course, there are different ways to do it. Dawa in Hyde Park use the antagonistic way. Right? You say something which will antagonize them, and then they get involved in your conversation. Right? That's not always a fruitful way. But to try to choose, a topic which is closer to their heart, something which will touch them, which they hadn't thought about, or which they thought about and they didn't find an answer for. Something which will catch their interest. You will try to, in other words, you choose topics which will cause them to get involved. Oh yeah, I'd like to know about that. A person who is that, like the example of that is like the purpose of creation. Why were we created? Is the question everybody asks himself sometime in his life. He asks this. No answers. So, it's a good point to catch somebody's attention. Because for Christians especially, and others, if you ask them why were they created, what is the purpose of their creation? Why did God create you? Why are you here in this world? They really have no answers, because there's no clear scriptural explanation for that. Well, they might have heard something here and there from a priest or a minister or whatever, but that's what they will echo if they remember it. Otherwise, you find them dumbfounded. And okay, why? Tell me. So it's a useful means to bring a person who was disinterested, didn't really care, get involved now in a conversation. The other person who is aggressive, coming at you with these questions, or when you're trying to explain something, they're always saying, no, I don't agree with you. No, I don't think it's that way. No, it's this. It's very aggressive. Then you have to try to neutralize that by what we call the PAR principle. P-A-R. P meaning probe. P for probe. P-R-O-B-E. You probe them to find out what's at the bottom of their question. What's the bottom of their attitude? Why are they like this? There must be something which is causing them to say this. Try to find that out. Because if you can find that out, then you can align yourself. That's the A. You can align yourself with them. This person coming about, you guys, always killing Muslims. Then you find out, okay, his father was killed in the Gulf War or in Iraq or whatever. Okay. So it's good. You explain to them, well, I can understand how you feel, having lost your father. I mean, this is something very difficult, to deal with. And, so you try to align yourself, cutting somebody's head off on the television and holding his head up and, it's horrible, really, really. It's something terrible. It makes me sick to my stomach to see that, I can understand how you feel. This is your line. I can understand how you feel, you have aligned yourself with them. So they don't feel it's us and them anymore. They say, okay, this person is sort of like on my side, right? So that way you neutralize their hostility. And then that makes them now, from there you try to raise them. That's your R, P-A-R. You try to raise them from that position of neutrality now to a position of being interested, to one of positive, and then ultimately, inshallah, to guidance. So this is what we have to assess the circumstance. We have to assess the individual. What level is that individual is on? What is his level or her level? What's driving them to what they're doing? Listen, hear, read between the lines. Don't just focus on what they're saying, but try to understand what's behind what they're saying. Try to find out. You hear a person who said, there is no God. There can't be a God. You guys believing in God, try to answer. Why don't you believe there could be a God? Well, my aunt, she was a really nice person. She used to help everybody, and she was this, and then one day she had a car accident. Bam! Killed her. And she was my favorite aunt. Why? That was, for him, or her, as a young person, there was no explanation. Nobody could explain to them why did that person have to die. Such a good person, etc. So that just killed in them, because there was no explanation, the idea of God. Because where's the rhyme and the reason? Where's the logic that such a nice person is destroyed? And then you have these evil people all around and they're living and having a happy time, and where's the justice here? There can't be a God. So but you find out that that's what their problem was, then you try to explain to them, people lose their lives and this type of thing. It doesn't necessarily mean, you might see it as something evil, but there could be other things behind it, and you try to explain to them, to neutralize those negative feelings. That just because we experience evil, it doesn't necessarily mean that that thing is ultimately evil. It might appear to us to be evil at this point in time, but there is some good from it that we're not able to comprehend. And then we give them that understanding through other examples, etc. So the principle, is, as we said, to understand where people are coming from, listen to what they're saying, find out the roots of what is driving them, and try to neutralize their negativity. Bring them to a neutral point where they're willing to listen. Because if they're not listening, if they're just attacking, and you're returning their attack with another attack, and then of course you're just bumping heads. You're not going anywhere. Your idea is to convey a message. And if your discussion is one of argumentation, just pure argumentation, then it's better to stop it. Don't waste your time and your energy, because you'll come away with your head banging in, and you say, oh man, I wish I didn't do that. Why did I bother to waste my time with this person? No, try to catch it early. See when these things are not going anywhere, you can't neutralize it, you can't redirect it, whatever, then leave it. Give the person a pamphlet instead. Give them a tape. Give them something else that they can't, you can't, what can you tell a tape, right? So you just listen. You want to listen, you don't want to listen, okay, khalas, you got it, right? At least you've got the message across to them. So this is an issue of also cutting our losses. We don't waste time unnecessarily. Try to avoid heavy argumentation. And just as an example, of trying to find common grounds or to neutralize some people's attitudes. Sometimes in Dawa, for example, if you're giving Dawa to a Christian, trying to give Dawa to a Christian, and the Christian tells you, listen, I know Jesus is God. It's not an issue I believe. I know Jesus is God. Okay? So you say to them, okay, how do you know Jesus is God? Right? Don't start arguing with them about, no, you don't really know. No. How do you know Jesus is God? Say, well, every time that I've prayed to Jesus, when I was in need, my prayers were answered. So I know Jesus is God. I've experienced Jesus in my life. You don't know because you haven't experienced him. Right? So when you have a person like that, reason in that belief will not benefit, because they're emotionally attached to something, right? They can't reason it out. So now you have to step out of that circumstance and you come somewhere else from them. Using reason, you say to them, I have a Hindu friend who said the same thing. I know Ganesh is God. And I asked him how. He said, because every time I prayed to Ganesh, my prayers were answered. What do you think? What do you think? And of course, the Christian, if they're a true Christian, they're going to say, no. That elephant head God, Ganesh, no, he didn't answer that person's prayers. No way. Right? No way. So then who answered the man's prayers? God. He said, well, that's the same thing we want to say to you. That you thought it was Jesus answering your prayers, but it was God. Right? You take them to something which is familiar to them, which they're not going to go with that one, then you bring it back, and show them in their own understanding that they missed out on this point here. So we try to give the dawah to people in a gradual way. Don't feel we have to give everything to them one time. We try to move them along gradually. Sometimes, of course, when we awaken to Islam, we become very zealous. We want everybody to practice Islam as we understand it now, right now. There's another danger we have to beware of. Give people a chance to grow, to progress. We have so many of the laws of Islam came gradually, allowing people an opportunity to grow with the guidance. So similarly, we try to convey to them a reasonable amount of the message, to take them to one point, and then give them a chance. Sometimes I know in Qatar, we will have people calling us up. I have somebody who wants to accept Islam. I said, really? Yeah, he's ready to accept Islam. So how do you know? I gave him a pamphlet and he accepted it. I said, wait, hold on. Did he say he wanted to read another pamphlet? Did he ask you? No. It's just he accepted the pamphlet. So take it easy. Give him a chance to read it. See what he says after that, right? Sometimes we become sort of overzealous, in the dawah, right? So this is, inshallah, we try to allow progression, development in people in the course of the dawah.
Gonna give you an example that wallahi I don't know an example in the dunya that is clear as this example in proving this point. Hadith in Bukhari and Muslim of Usama ibn Zayd radiyallahu anhu. The Muslims were fighting kuffar, and there was one warrior from the kuffar who was taking care of business. He was getting down on the battlefield. When he was taking care of business, the Muslims, the companions said, look, tomorrow somebody has to deal with that guy. Someone has to make it his business just to go and deal with that guy, and we're going to get everyone else. Usama ibn Zayd said, Hu Ali, I'll deal with him, I'll take care of him. And another companion. They went to the guy the next day and they overpowered him. One narration said Usama had his sword. Another narration said he had a spear. He overpowered him and he got ready to kill him. And the guy said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. And Usama killed him. They took the news to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Rasulullah became clearly, apparently upset. Ya Usama, aqataltuhu ba'da ma qala la ilaha illallah? Ya Rasulullah, innahu qalaha khawfan min as-sayf. Ya Usama, aqataltuhu ba'da ma qala la ilaha illallah? Ya Rasulullah, innahu qalaha khawfan min as-sayf. يا أسامة أقتلته بعدما قال لا إله إلا الله يا رسول الله إنه قالها خوفا من السيف أفلا شققت عن قلبه حتى تعلم أقالها أم لا. Did you kill him, Usama, after he said La ilaha illallah? He only said it because I was about to kill him 3 times. And the Rasul kept saying the same thing. Usama said, I wish I had been born only at that moment, so I wouldn't be responsible Yawm al-Qiyamah for La ilaha illallah. Ikhwan, why is this issue so clear?
Ibn Zubayr, the cousin of Aisha radiallahu anha. The cousin of Aisha radiallahu anha. She was passing by the house of Aisha radiallahu anha, and she heard Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. She was standing up and praying. And Urwa mentions that I do not know whether it was the night salah, the salah of the Tahajjud before Fajr, or whether it was the salah of Duha, whether it was the salah after sunrise. For I do not know which salah it was. Yet I passed by her, and she was standing up in salah, and she was reciting from the Quran. And then when she came upon the verse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَمَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْنَا وَوَقَانَا عَذَابَ السَّمُومِ. And when she came upon the beautiful verse of Allah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about His ibad, His slaves, and there are those of them who say, فَمَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْنَا. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed us and gave us a bounty. وَوَقَانَا عَذَابَ السَّمُومِ. And saved us from the adab al-samum, from the terrible torment. From the terrible torment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved us. And so Urwa continues. So I saw Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha reciting this verse. And so I went away and she was crying, and I left her crying. And I came back after many, many hours. I came back after many, many hours. And I passed by her again. And she was still reciting the same verse. فَمَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْنَا وَوَقَانَا عَذَابَ السَّمُومِ. Naam. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the great bounty and saved us from the terrible torment. My brothers, have you heard of the story of Malik bin Dinar? The story of Malik bin Dinar. He used to stay up all night imploring to Allah, grabbing his beard and saying, Ya Allah, indeed you know who will go to the hellfire, and you know, O Allah, who will go to paradise. O Allah, I implore you, which of these groups am I in? O Allah, I ask you, which of these groups am I in?
SubhanAllah, it is exactly opposite to the way some of the Sahaba used to think and act. Ibn Amr radiallahu anhu, he set high goals for himself. And he wanted to worship Allah Azza wa Jal so much that he did not even want to approach his young wife. He was very young and his wife was very young. Both of them were in their teens at that time. maybe 15, 16, 17. At this age, Ibn Amr did not want to approach his wife or do anything that would take him away from obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and worshipping Him. So he wanted to read Quran and finish it every day, the whole Quran. He wanted to pray the whole night long, all night long. He wanted to fast every single day. And the Prophet ﷺ told him, no, don't do this. There is, inna libadanika alayka haqqa. Your body has a right on you, and your wife has a right on you. So you have to give every one of these their right. So he said, don't fast more than 3 days every month. He said, oh Allah's Messenger, I can do more. See, a young man is asking for more.
Civilization and development as a new source of energy. And so Afghanistan and Iraq and others was already set 15 years ago. It had nothing to do with Saddam. That was just convenient. And now we find out. You see, dead fish swim and the live ones the dead fish float and stink and the live ones keep swimming. Now we find out there was no weapons of mass destruction. They still looking for them, but now they've accepted that there are none. But they said, well, we're sorry about that, but we were still justified in going in there. Okay. Well, how many lives were taken in that exercise that only lasted, by the way, it only lasted for 34 days, the actual exercise, 34 days. How many lives? 51,000 lives. Close to the same amount of lives that were lost in the Vietnam War by Americans over a period of 7 years. Now you tell me, 58,000 American lives that were lost in the Vietnam War, a war that they lost, and 51,000 lives of Muslims, Iraqis, that were lost in 34 days. You think that's justice? Just to get one man?
نبيكم واحد. Your religion is one. إلهكم واحد. Your God is one. Your prophet is one. Your book is one. Why is it that you differ so much? Why is it that the Muslims fail to unite on anything? Personal gains and interests. It is only one thing, hukmul kursi, the right to rule and govern, not the right to see the welfare of your Muslim brothers and sisters. Millions are being killed, millions are being slaughtered, millions are being raped, and you sit and look at the issues of fiqh. And what is the hukam? You don't need a hukam from no one. Use your aql, use your intellect. That if your mother was being slaughtered on your doorstep, you would not run to the mufti of any country. You would defend your honor, your property, your dignity, and your chastity, and your religion. That is the da'wah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
Even if you are in there, my brothers, death will catch up to you. Wherever you are, you cannot hide from it. If you can't hide from it, then you must prepare for it. You see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed that death catch up with every one of us. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not die, so therefore creation must die. So every single thing on this earth, whether it be animate or inanimate, every single thing has to die. Even the angel of death, my brothers, has to die. So how will you escape death? Even Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the most worthy that we may say of those people who should be the most worthy of escaping death, even he had to die. So if death had caught up with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how can it not catch up with us? How can it not catch up with us? It will indeed catch up with us. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the time when the angels will come down and take your soul. So He says, فَلَوْلَا إِذَا بَلَغَتِ الْحُلْقُومِ وَأَنْتُمْ حِينَئِذٍ تَنْظُرُونَ وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْكُمْ وَلَكِنْ لَا تُبْصِرُونَ فَلَوْلَا إِن كُنْتُمْ غَيْرَ مَدِينِينَ تَرْجِعُونَهَا إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَوْلَا إِذَا بَلَغَتِ الْحُلْقُومِ. Then when the soul has reached the throat, when the soul has reached the throat and the person is just in the last throes of death, his body shaking as his soul is just about to leave. And when the soul has reached the throat, وَأَنْتُمْ حِينَئِذٍ تَنْظُرُونَ. And you, O father and mother of the person who is dying, and you, O wife and son and daughter of the person who is dying, and you, the brother and friend of the person who is dying, you are looking upon this person dying in front of you. وَأَنْتُمْ حِينَئِذٍ تَنْظُرُونَ وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْكُمْ وَلَكِنْ لَا تُبْصِرُونَ. And we, meaning the angels of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are closer to that man, meaning taking his soul away, than you can even imagine. However, you do not even see them. وَلَكِنْ لَا تُبْصِرُونَ فَلَوْلَا إِن كُنْتُمْ غَيْرَ مَدِينِينَ. That indeed if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not obliged you to follow this religion, this is the tafsir of the verse. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not obliged you to follow this Quran and to follow this Sunnah and to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, تَرْجِعُونَهَا. Return it back. Return it back if you can. إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. If indeed you are truthful. Try and return it back if you're truthful. This is a challenge of Allah, an open challenge. Are there any challenges? Is there anyone who will answer this challenge? SubhanAllah, people have tried to answer this challenge, haven't they? People have tried. So Firaun, for example, he tried. Nimrod, he tried. All the greatest kings, those who are so arrogant, they tried. Those people who attacked Rasulullah ﷺ and who were enemies, they tried, but they couldn't make it. Where are they now? Ashes and ash. As they say, ashes to ashes and dust to dust, isn't it? Naam, that's where they are now. They couldn't make it. They couldn't answer this challenge.
During the time of the Prophet ﷺ, during the time of Sahaba, Tabi'een, all the education was imparted through the mosque. Even the old universities, one of the oldest universities, if you think about it, these three universities, Al-Azhar and Jamiatul Qarabiyin, Jamiatul Zaytuna, all these three, they were just mosques. And they were the seat of learning. Just see the design of the mosque in those times, that they used to have a big courtyard, and there is a big hall of the mosque, and then just before it, once you enter into the mosque, you come across a big courtyard, and that courtyard is surrounded by rooms on both sides. In Arabic they were known to be riwaq. So these rooms, Anyhow, so there are rooms on both sides. So why these rooms were built? Only for the students of knowledge, because the people used to come and stay there. It was just a lodging for them, and then they used to study inside the hall of the mosque. There were places of wudu and tahara to clean themselves. In some areas you will find a big pool of water in the center of the courtyard, and that pool of water was used for wudu, ablution. And this practice is still known in many mosques in India and Pakistan. This is how the mosques were built even in Spain. Now come to, just think, when you come to Cambridge and Oxford, you enter the old colleges of Cambridge and Oxford, you enter from the main gate, you will find a grassy plot in the center. Around it, on both sides, are the rooms, either one floor or two floor. Mostly they are two floors. And again, you come to another area of the same college, you will find another grassy plot. Around it are the rooms built. From where this design has come? It has come from Spain, from the Muslim Spain. Because the universities of the Muslim Spain were a lot older than Cambridge and Oxford. So mosque was the seat of learning. But nowadays it is a pity that this function of the mosque is being deserted. In some areas mosques are just locked.
Analogy. And the ulama have made analogy from the Quran and the Sunnah. The Quran mentions clearly about khamr, intoxicants, which are forbidden. The Sunnah highlights that whatever intoxicates in large amounts is forbidden in small amounts. So taking any new form of drug in society, whatever name you want to call it, whatever names that they have on the street, crack, cocaine, LSD, whatever names the youth they want to call it, if it falls into, if it hallucinates you, if it takes your mind away, then the laws of the Sharia will apply to it, that it is something muharram, it is something which is forbidden, irrespective of what society states, that what they want to legalize from class D to class B or class A, that this is only from B to down to D, that this is only a soft drug, and this is something which has some benefit in the taking of this drug. There is no benefit at all in the usage of drugs. This is Islam's view. There is no usage at all. There is no way of saying that you to take any what they call marijuana and weed and these type of elements will alleviate a person's problems. And then they write such stupidity as people who are suffering from certain diseases, they need to smoke this and it will help them. How can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator? أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقَ وَهُوَ اللَّطِيفُ الْخَبِيرُ. Does he not know what he has created? وَهُوَ اللَّطِيفُ الْخَبِيرُ. And he is the subtle and the aware. He knows what is good for his creation. We ourselves don't know. So how can something filthy become something good for us? Something which is muharram, something which is evil, all of a sudden become good for mankind. And then we find that people like to state that, well, we're still better than those people who live in Muslim countries and do these actions. Everybody will be judged upon their own actions and their own intentions. We don't need to worry about the people in Saudi Arabia, how much they drink and how they bring their alcohol, and the British people who make drinks for them inside there, and the British people who are caught in Saudi Arabia of selling beer and alcohol inside the country. That doesn't concern us. What concerns us is what are we doing and what are our Muslim youth doing. Yeah, they'll be punished on their own standing, and we'll be punished on our own standing for the sins that we done and the effect that we had on our society. That's what we need to be worried about now. Not so much worried about other people and what they're doing in their society. They have their people to deal with their society, to advise their youth on how to rectify the society. We need to worry about our youth and not pass the buck, as they say, to other people and to other nations, that they are responsible for the behavior in our Muslim society. And we find that, we know for a fact that mankind will make these mistakes. وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. Mankind has been created in a state of weakness, that if not all of us, but some of us will go towards this sin. And the amount of Muslim youth who are going towards this sin is increasing on a daily basis. The taking of intoxicants, the taking of drugs has become a more and a more part of their habit, an habitual habit of their life, that they take these substances. So we need to begin to think and take a constructive approach that what are we going to do? If we are not doing counseling work and learning the effects of drugs in our society, the effects in the schooling system, the effects around us in the environment, how are we going to help people? How are we going to address these topics? Are we forever going to remain behind the veil? Are we forever going to remain behind the veil in the sense that, yes, these things happen, but we don't really want to discuss them. We don't really want to mention them. We feel too ashamed. There's nothing to be ashamed about. Our society is such.
And you want to return anyway back to your country, that's different. Those brothers and sisters are in a different situation, right? And there are other examples for them from Kitab and Sunnah. But those who want to stay here have to be convinced of this. This is something I mentioned in a recent khutbah, that we have to regard Britain as a as a pre-Islamic society. That they are in Jahiliyyah, no doubt that it's Jahiliyyah. But inshallah it is a pre-Islamic Jahiliyyah. But they will come to Islam inshallah. And I mentioned in that khutbah, I'll say it again because it's such an important teaching of the Prophet ﷺ, when he said, خِيَارُكُمْ فِي الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ خِيَارُكُمْ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ إِذَا فَقُهُ. He said the best of you in Jahiliyyah are the best in Islam if they have understanding of the religion.
What is right sometimes is to make sure that you are not doing what is wrong. And the first thing, and what I've personally heard from many young people is, that have put them off masjid, if not for life, then certainly for a good many years of their life, is the maktab. The way they are being treated when they come to masjid. The first experience we are giving them of the masjid. What is this? They come and they are being treated like animals in some cases. May Allah forgive us, may Allah give us a greater understanding, but this is the reality and this is the truth. Many Muslim children are being treated like animals in the maktabs around the country. They go to the masjid, the intention of sending them to the masjid is good, that they should learn the basics of Islam, they should learn how to read the Quran, but the methods that are being implemented will get exactly the different, will achieve the different, the opposite goal. Okay, they will learn how to pronounce the Quran, they will learn how to read the Quran, but at the same time they will make a firm intention in their mind that they will never touch the Quran again. I've heard kids saying this, when I'm out of this madrasa, I will never ever touch the Quran again. Yeah. I will never come to the masjid, because you are putting such a hatred in their hearts for everything connected with the Quran, for everything connected with the masjid, for everything connected with the word Maulana Sahib or Moli Sahib or Hafiz Sahib or Qari Sahib or whatever title you want to be using for the teacher, that they will just not want to look that way again. And it is only by the grace and the mercy and kindness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that later on in life Allah changes their hearts and they will come back. I know so many people who have these experiences. So the first thing we have to do is not to scare the children and the young people away from the masjid. Not to treat them once they come in a way that will never make them want to come again. It doesn't mean that we have to put on a party every time and we have to treat them thinking that they are stupid or silly and the only thing they are interested in is eating and drinking. That's not true either. You don't have to put up a feast. You don't have to have a Coca-Cola machine in the corner of the masjid for the youth or the young people to want to come to the masjid. But you certainly have to treat them well. First of all, do not hit children. Do not hit children with a stick or without a stick when you are teaching them. It is against the teaching of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is against the teaching of Islam. It is a completely different matter that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that when your children are 7, tell them to pray salah. Of course, after teaching them. If you are going to tell them when they're 7, you would have to teach them first, wouldn't you? And when they are 10, if they refuse to pray, you can hit them for that. That is for the parents, not for the Mawli Sahib, not for the Hafiz Sahib, and not for the Qari Sahib of the masjid. He is not allowed to hit them, especially not on anything pertaining to the learning. You cannot hit someone because he hasn't managed to make that verse of Quran stick in his mind. Now this is not right. Ta'deeb is a different matter. If you use some limited, very, very controlled physical force to educate or to put down, to show the limits when it comes to your own children is a different matter. But to do this in the masjid and to make this the first experience that these poor little children get of Islam, now this is wrong. At home they are being treated well. In the nursery school they are being treated well with love and kindness and affection. And in the school they are being treated well with something akin to love and kindness and possibly affection. And in the masjid they are being treated like animals. Now where are they going to go? Where will their loyalty be? With the school or with the masjid? With the nursery school or with the masjid? Obviously it's not going to be with the masjid. And whose fault is it? It is our fault. So the first thing we have to do is when they come or when they are being sent to masjid, make the first experience of the mosque a positive one, that they will like to come.
عليك بإكثار الصلاة